situation and how we kind of came together. It was really interesting. You had written an article that was published in Podiatry Today back in January of 2020, prior to all the craziness of COVID and everything that's gone on, ironically enough. But it had to do with physician burnout. And that's a topic that's really near and dear to all of us. Not that we've all been burnt out, but we recognize the problem. As all of us have been in the healthcare professions for years and years, we've seen it at all levels, really, not just among providers, but even within a hospital setting of employees or, even from the patient's perspective. But really focusing in on the professional side of things. This topic of burnout is real, and something's got to give. So I just kind of like to start by asking you your perspective, really kind of what triggered you to address that in that article when you first got going?
I think my own personal journey sort of triggered it, to tell you the truth. I think it's a topic that is so pervasive within the medical community, but at the same time isn't discussed or addressed or tackled nearly enough. So when I was given that opportunity by Podiatry Today to take that on, I was equally grateful and terrified. Terrified simply because I was going to need to decide how vulnerable I wanted to make myself. How much of my own story I wanted to put out there. It wasn't about me, but my personal experience certainly lent itself to the topic. But I was thrilled to be able to get that message out there in that way. And, certainly you pointed out that it's before COVID really truly hit in full force. And it's been interesting how much I've been thinking about how that is affecting this issue for healthcare workers as well.
Yeah, it might be interesting to even do a follow-up article, maybe even interview some colleagues or anything, to see where they are. Are they feeling more stressed out, more burnt out, let's say, than they were a year ago, with that anniversary coming up? But we all have seen it, and your story is really, I guess you threw it out there. But I would venture to guess that there's so many people who feel some level of whether it's stress, full burnout. And recognizing it is so important, and then knowing how to intervene is by far really the challenge, because it's so easy to get sucked up in our daily routines, and then one day clicks by, and then a week's gone by, and it's the same thing, and before you know it, years have gone by, and what has changed. And so listening to your interview with Randy too, there were some really good points that came up, talking about a lot of times surgeons feel their only place for a respite is in the OR, but then they kind of dread coming out of there because of everything else that hits them. I guess from my perspective, what I've seen is that there are a lot of factors at work here. Even though we love what we do, I think the most sensitive among us are the ones who feel it the most. Ironically enough, you're talking about in your interview too, how it's the ones who maybe have the qualities that we want in a doc, are the most maybe compassionate, but they're also the ones who feel the most. And so they're not just technicians. They're the ones who are really basically feeling the full impact, trying to do the right thing constantly, whether professionally, whether at home, trying to find that balance. And this leads to that whole ultimately imbalance that throws us off. So, just there's an article that just came out though, and I wanted to kind of lead this, kind of take this this path though. A number of years ago, I witnessed something similar to this, but there's an article that was just published recently about this doc up in Michigan, who is basically they're trying to get rid of the administration in their hospital. It's like the docs have finally said enough is enough. You can't justify all these cutbacks and treating people like commodities continually, yet you're only going to take a $2.5 million bonus. you know, bonus yourself for what? So I think it leads to this kind of hostility. It percolates, and the administrative guys look to the docs to continue to do the right thing, and they take advantage of that. The insurance companies take advantage of that too. They know docs are going to write things off. They're not going to challenge things. But I think maybe we reached that tipping point. But in the meantime, this leads to burnout. So, you know, your thoughts on all this. And I know it was kind of long-winded, but I wanted to get my points in before Rick starts talking.
You know, I was fascinated by that article because I think, at least for me, it's the first real concerted show of action by a doc and a group of docs, because I think they mentioned there were a group of them that expressed, you know, a vote of no confidence at one point in another action by that administration, that are really speaking up for themselves and their patients. And I think that's important. I think too many times, I think that's not even a thought that crosses doctors' minds, that that's even possible, that they even have any power or any say in things like that. And I think it's great that they're putting their voice out there to kind of call them on their nonsense and see what could come of it to better the entire healthcare system.
You know, so my story, and I've told this before, but it's worth repeating. I remember a few years ago, I was in a general staff meeting at my hospital, and there's a couple hundred docs in there, and they brought in somebody from corporate, from another state, came in, and the whole time, this person from corporate never once mentioned healthcare, never once talked about patient care. And I'm doing the slow burn, but I looked around the room, and every head in that room was down. Not one person is looking at the speaker. They're listening, but they're not making eye contact. And it wasn't like they were just all playing with their iPhones or something. You know, it was just, you could just feel this resentment, and it's like, to me, that was a defining moment for me to see. It's like something is so drastically wrong with this picture. And, you know, aggravated me even more was I had two patients recently who had been in the hospital. The whole time they weren't even offered a wash basin. So to hear the same story from two totally unlikely patients, it's like, can we talk about these type of topics maybe in a general staff meeting versus listening to all this nonsense where you just want to see how much you can get out of us, how many RVUs we're worth, et cetera.